Hi guys, Lauren Ostry with Functional Performance Physical Therapy Center, and we are lucky to have Dr. Marcy Catella-Madruga here with us today. She's a friend and colleague. She was one of my mentors when I first started in practice many, many years ago. Always kind of looked up to her as a hard-charging professional moving the PT practice forward, and she never ceases to surprise me with kind of what she's doing. She's transitioned her PT practice into kind of a more holistic approach. She's, over the course of her career, has gotten numerous certifications and accolades in the world of functional medicine, which is, she's here today to kind of talk to us about that, of what it is, how it can help us, particularly in this time of crisis. So Marcy, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of take over, and then any questions, you can write those questions in as she's talking, and then Michaela can kind of proctor those at the end. So hold tight at the end. We will get to your questions eventually, but those will be kind of answered at the end. So Marcy, take it away.
Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate the introduction. And first, I just want to make sure that my sound's okay and everyone can hear me, because it says it would be better if I have a headset, but I don't have one. So if you can't hear, type that in the chat and just let us know. That way we can fix that for you, and I can try and talk a little bit louder. So this idea of functional medicine, what is it and why is it important to reteach your body how to heal itself? One of the things I think that we forget is that our body is very intuitive, and if we're giving it what it needs, it can do a ton of repair work on its own, and it doesn't need a lot of medical intervention to get there. So according to the Institute of Functional Medicine is a systems biology approach to evaluating, identifying, and addressing the root cause of disease, and each differential diagnosis may be one of many contributing to a person's illness. So what that means is that each individual person has a set of symptoms, and that oftentimes traditional Western and allopathic medicine is really directed at treating the symptoms and managing your symptoms, but not necessarily treating what's going on underneath those symptoms to get you fully back to health. So the way that functional medicine comes in and looks at it is that we go back, hopefully, in the case of someone who knows their full medical history, back to even what your parents were going through, and sometimes even grandparents. So if you know you have a family line of, like, for instance, people who know that they have a family line of breast cancer, but they don't carry the BRCA gene. Well, where did that start? And what went wrong at that time? And how can we go back and readdress that? Because that gets passed down in your DNA from generation to generation. And by the fourth generation that occurs is actually the time when you see the most highly prevalent case of whatever that is that's going on. So another way to look at that is that the symptom management and not the management of the condition that's actually happening underneath is what's going on with the opioid crisis. It's still a problem in this country. And what we're looking at is that doctors keep throwing these pain medications and these muscle relaxers and sometimes anticonvulsants and anti-seizure medications at pain, but they're not ever addressing what's going on underlying. And there is now, and the research proves that there is an emotional component to pain, and if we don't address that part, we're never going to fix the actual problem. And so in functional medicine, we want to stop just looking at each individual symptom and treating it with a drug, and look at the overall picture, if we can, from pre-birth all the way to now. And those things that impact that, they can be the environment that your grandparents grew up in. It can be where you grew up when you were younger. It can be trauma that you've sustained. It can be a lot of different factors. And so we just want to make sure that we're looking at the whole big picture. And there is a question as to whether or not functional medicine is real or not. And believe it or not, there is even a very large functional medicine clinic at the Cleveland Clinic Hospital, which is one of the premier hospitals for orthopedic sports medicine in the country. So it is a real thing that is helping thousands of people around the world, and it is something that you could definitely have help you too if you're struggling with some kind of autoimmune condition, pain, some other type of thing that pops up that you've tried everything and it doesn't work for you. We have other ways of looking at that. So my name is pretty long all on its own, but then you see all those letters after it, and they all have a meaning for certification, because when I was going to PT school, the school that I went to was Regis University, and they had that belief that you should be a lifelong learner. And I totally agree with that philosophy, because I think that when you're not growing, you're dying. And the same is true with learning. If you're not going to learn new things, you're stagnant. And so then you're not growing, you're dying. The most important initials there, the first 5, PT, DPT, just show that I received a doctorate in physical therapy from Regis University. And then the next 4, that CFMP, that's what makes me uniquely qualified to talk to you about this today. So those stand for Certified Functional Medicine Practitioner. Those 4 letters CFMP, if you see them after somebody's name, that can indicate that they got a certification for functional medicine practice. Or you'll see another one that says CFMW, and that's a certified functional medicine wellness coach. So you'll see those 2, and some people use them interchangeably, but there is a slight difference. A wellness coach is somebody who is less qualified. They could be a financial planner that's taken this class to be a wellness coach. So just keep that in mind. So goals of our chat, I want to make sure that we understand stress pathways and the negative effects that they can have on your body, understand endocrine system as a global whole because it plays a very important role, and then the basis for autoimmune disease, and then how can you work with your body to help yourself recover so that you're moving forward and growing and not dying. And then, of course, why having a coach through that is important, whether that coach happens to be a functional medicine practitioner, a wellness coach, a mentor, or even a counselor, someone to help you through that process and keep you accountable. So those are the goals I have for this. I'm just going to take a quick sip of water here. So stress pathways in the body is where we're going to start. So all of your hormones in the body are regulated by what's called the autonomic nervous system. It's basically your body's autopilot. It tries to keep you in balance, and it wants to make sure that when you're out of balance, it tries to get back there as fast as possible, but it has some requirements to get there. So one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that you have to have really great communication between the liver and the hypothalamus. The liver sends a signal to the hypothalamus that tells the hypothalamus to release certain things throughout the body because it's kind of guiding the hypothalamus and telling it what we need. So if your liver, which processes every chemical you take into your body, is overwhelmed by chemicals, it's not going to be able to send the right signal to the hypothalamus, which means that you're not going to have the right hormone production to help your body recover from stress. The other thing your liver does that is unique to the liver is it actually produces glutathione. Glutathione is an antioxidant, and it's the #1 antioxidant used in the body to help tissue repair. And if you're low on glutathione, you'll suffer from aches, pains, your body will start breaking down, you won't recover from workouts, even if that workout is like a 45-minute walk. That's very casual paced, conversational pace, you'll feel like your legs are heavy for days. You'll feel like your body can't recover from that. And so the liver being clean is a very important thing. Now, I'm not saying you can never take Tylenol or Advil or have a glass of wine or a beer or have a cup of coffee. But what I'm saying is that we have to support the liver in order to have a healthy endocrine system so that our stress can be resolved. So you can also think of your autonomic nervous system and the way it's regulated as the fight or flight system. And this allows the release of corticosteroids in your body, epinephrine and norepinephrine. And what those do is they tell your body either whether you can stay and handle this or whether you need to leave and leave quickly. So some things that are needed, basic needs that you have in order to support this pathway is that you need good, again, communication between liver and hypothalamus. You need vitamin D, zinc, and selenium. You need rest. 6 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep is best, but there is some new research showing that if you can get 8 hours of sleep, even if it's in 2-hour chunks, your body will help recover then. And then you need moments of ease that last longer than moments of overwhelm. So when you're considering what you're doing throughout the day, and if you're feeling those sensations of my heart rate's picking up, I feel a little bit jittery, I feel anxious, I feel overwhelmed, if those are thoughts that you're thinking throughout the day, then it's a good time to kind of check in with yourself, take a couple of deep breaths and back off. And if that means skipping a workout, even if it's planned, skip the workout, do it tomorrow, do it the next day, change your rest day because you should have a rest day in your workout routine every week. So this shows what happens in the cortisol response. So what happens in the brain is there's a stress signal sent, and in a good functioning system, what will happen is that will stimulate the pituitary gland that then goes to release adrenocorticotropic hormones in the adrenal complex, which the adrenal complex sits right on top of the kidneys. And if you're not sure where the kidneys are, if you feel the bottom of your ribs and then just kind of wrap around the sides, they don't come any further forward than that. So your adrenals sit right there at the bottom of the rib cage, right above the kidneys. When you wake up in the morning, there is a normal release of this because waking up, especially if you're waking up with an alarm clock, is a stress, but your body should recover from it quickly. The thing that this release from the pituitary gland side does is it helps your body to do tissue repair. It helps with fat mobilization and it helps you to decrease inflammation. On the other side, if we have the bad pathway, what happens is you get an increased cardiovascular response where the heart rate stays elevated for a long period of time. The breathing rate changes, which adds further stress actually to the cardiovascular system because you never give it a rest period. It causes blood flow to change. It also causes increased muscle stress, and then it causes increased muscle activity, which can lead you to have poor sleep. So if we look at the next slide, this is what's called the diurnal pattern or the awakening response for cortisol. Cortisol is the hormone released in your body that really is needed for wake sleep cycles to counteract what's happening with melatonin. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about melatonin being important because it helps regulate your sleep cycle. Well, cortisol is just as important. So if you look at this dotted line, this is our normal cortisol response. And what should happen is it should peak about 30 minutes after you wake up so that you're most awake then. And then it slowly decreases throughout the day and ends up down here at night. So then melatonin can take over and help you sleep. In a lot of people that I see, what happens is they have either this green response where they don't ever get fully awake. And then typically my patients that I'm seeing, my clients that I'm working with, they will drop actually below and out of this range and they end up really down here. And what that does is it actually causes enough stress in the system that they can't sleep at night and their body doesn't ever start producing melatonin. So when we see these people who are way out of normal ranges, what we start looking at is that there's a process in the body where cortisol creates a negative impact and causes things like weight gain, particularly around the middle of the abdomen. You'll see in some patients that they start gaining a lot of weight in the middle. They have really skinny arms, really skinny legs, and they just seem like their face is a little bit blotchy. They bruise typically very easy, and they don't have a lot of ability to recover. And when we start seeing that, and they start saying consistently things like, I'm only eating 1,200 calories a day, and I don't drink caffeine, and I stopped drinking alcohol, and I still can't lose weight, and I'm exercising, but I feel tired or I feel pain all the time. We start thinking about underlying conditions that are happening to the adrenal cortex, where they might be developing a disease called Addison's disease or a disease called Cushing's disease. And those patients then have to have significant medical intervention because it's often missed. It gets too far down the pathway to not have medical intervention happen. Now, I will say, with it, particularly with Cushing's disease, you can end up with a pituitary gland tumor, and that causes your body to produce the wrong amount of cortisol, and that then causes pituitary gland Cushing's disease. But when we see it just because of the cortisol pattern happening from the adrenal cortex, and we see this pattern get out of whack, then usually Cushing's disease happens from that, as does Addison's disease. The other thing we see when cortisol is out of whack is we see people develop chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, those kinds of things. And the other thing I want you to notice about this pattern is this means that this was measured throughout the day. And what you see in a 24-hour cortisol test typically is, if you've ever done this before, they're having you collect urine in a container that's about this large, and you're basically collecting it in a cup and pouring it into that all throughout the day. This particular slide comes from the Dutch test from, I believe it's Precision Analytics. Yep, Precision Analytical. And they have you actually pee on a strip of paper several times throughout the day, so they actually can create that path of what's happening to your cortisol throughout the day. This picture here is a really complex overview of what happens with hormone pathways throughout the day and throughout a life cycle. And so the main things I want you to take from this slide, because it's taken me a year to understand this slide, is that when you're looking at what's happening, when cortisol is overproduced for long periods of time, you begin to have breakdown of the fight or flight system, so your body doesn't know what it's supposed to be doing or where it's supposed to be. You have poor sleep, memory is impaired, the body's ability to heal decreases. It can lead to Cushing's disease, adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, inflammation, and autoimmune disorders. And if you look at each pathway, you'll notice, especially like if you look in here for the cortisol pathway, things like licorice, grapefruit can help this. And if you look on this side, magnolia, citrus peel extract, those are things that can help us. So we have the ability to naturally help our bodies heal if we support it in the right way. And so those are things that I want you to take from this slide, not that you have to know what all of these pathways mean, because it's a very complex system. So what is the endocrine system? You can see there, it's a system of glands in the body that secrete hormones and send messages about the body's health. The main functions of the endocrine system are to regulate metabolism, growth, development, sexual function, and reproduction, heart rate, blood pressure, appetite, sleep-wake cycles, and your body temperature. So you'll notice you have people around you that are either always cold or always hot. That means that their endocrine system may not be functioning optimally, and we need to try and get them back as close to optimal as possible. Again, if we can do it without medical intervention, the less medical intervention we have, the better, because some of the medications that you start for some of these organ systems, for some of these glands, are ones that you don't ever get to come off of. So if you're somebody who has a thyroid condition, once you go on that medication, you almost never get to change that. And your dose for that continues to change every couple of years because your body produces less and less of that hormone no matter what you do to support that system. So these are things too that we should start getting measured fairly early, but I know I was 28 the first time they did a thyroid test on me, and my mom had a thyroid condition when she was in her early 20s. So my family history says I should have had it done sooner. They only did it because I requested it. Most women don't get tested until they're 32. And what we notice is that by 32, there's already changes, but they don't know what the changes are because they've never monitored it before. So as we look at what we can do, there are blood tests that are fairly simple that could be run every year that we as people should fight for in our healthcare, because they don't actually cost the system that much, but they can help you stay off medication for a longer period of time. And I think that that's important in the long run for your health. So this is a picture of the female endocrine system. And you can see here pineal gland, pituitary gland, thyroid and parathyroid, thymus glands, adrenal glands, pancreas, gonads or ovaries. And the male picture is pretty same. It's just the testicles instead of the ovaries that are controlled there. And they don't have the hypothalamus in here, but like I said, the hypothalamus is the controller organ, and so it does play a role in this endocrine system as well, because it's what tells all of these glands what to release and when. And things to keep in mind here is that stress does control all of this. So if your body is stressed out, it's going through that glutathione faster, it's going through your vitamin D faster, and you don't have those then to produce appropriate hormones and do tissue repair. Graves, Cushing's, Addison, thyroid dysfunction, testosterone production are all controlled by this. And if there's a problem in the endocrine system, you can have infertility. So when we're looking at women who've had trouble conceiving, couples that have had trouble conceiving even, we are looking at both the male and the female side, because if there isn't enough testosterone to produce enough sperm, we could have a low sperm count. And so to correct that, we have to correct the stress or the underlying thing that's happening. Maybe it's a low vitamin D in our male. It could be low vitamin D in the female, or the thyroid is not working properly in either person. So if we can correct those things and we can do it non-medically, typically we can get rid of the infertility problem as well. So that's something to keep in mind. In males, just so you know, excess cortisol does cause one of those steroid pathways that we looked at on that really complicated slide to change testosterone to estrogen in what we call the aromatization of testosterone. So if you feel like you're somebody, and we've heard about this a lot in the news lately, or just around, you've seen clinics that are low T clinics or male clinics. Those are clinics that are supplementing testosterone, and what we might need to do is change the stress level. So to see if we can get the body to bring it back up naturally, we might need to give a specific supplement like saw palmetto, or even things like frankincense that can help change testosterone more naturally. So those are things to keep in mind as well. So the endocrine system is supported by sleep, meditation, nutrition, exercise, and supplements. And I know that you've heard that sleep is king a million times, but it truly is. 80% of your body's tissue repair and system repair happens while you're sleeping, including detoxification of your organs. So like I said, if your liver has a bunch of toxicity in it and it's not getting a chance to clean out fully, then you could definitely have a problem where your endocrine system is not being repaired and your body tissues are not being repaired. Meditation can calm that fight or flight response. And actually, this is something we use a lot, not even just guided meditation that can take an hour, but even just a couple of minutes of deep breathing. And I use that a lot in my patients that have vertigo, because their system, their fight or flight system, when they're having an episode of dizziness, gets so stimulated that that stress response kicks in, and then they can't calm down and they can't sleep and they stay dizzy for days, as opposed to 5 to 10 minutes if we're having them do some deep breathing. So that can really help, meditation can really help with that fight or flight response. And nutrition. So I put nutrition there instead of your diet because I think a lot of people hear the word diet and they have a very negative connotation with that. And I want you to stop thinking about your diet as being something that's positive or negative. I want you to think about your intake of nutrition as something that helps support your body and helps you heal, because our relationship with food has a role in how we perceive ourselves as well. And again, if we have those negative perceptions of self, then we are not going to progress to where we are fully healing our body and supporting our body. So our nutrition, they know that nutrition that's supported by mostly whole foods, that's low in sugar, low in alcohol intake, and low in caffeine intake, are more helpful for tissue repair and recovery than diets that are high in sugar, high alcohol consumption, and high caffeine consumption. So our nutrition is something that we want to focus on in terms of supporting the body. A diet is something that you do that could be negative. And I'm not saying all diets are bad, but I'm saying I want you to start thinking about it in a positive light and reframe the thought process you have around what you eat. And then the other thing that I want you to consider is that there's some new research out there about that shows that resets 3 to 4 times a year can really help. And those are coming from Dr. Longo. He's a PhD in biogerontology from Italy. And he's been looking at how to help the system repair as we go through periods of stress and ease. And one of the things that he said is that you can do what's called a fasting mimicking diet, where you're not actually fasting, but you're eating less calories for 5 days than you normally would. And you're doing that on a period of every quarter. So for 5 days out of every quarter, you eat less calories than you typically would. And the rest of the quarter, you have nutrition that supports the body instead of detracts from the body. And that's not to say you can't ever have a candy bar, or you can't go out and have a beer with your friends, or a glass of wine with your friends, or a couple of glasses of wine. That's not to say that at all. It's just to say that 90% of the time, heck, even 80% of the time, we want to have nutrition that supports our system, supports our body, so that we're helping it recover, so that we don't end up down this path of, I have pain, I have inflammation, I'm not losing weight even though I'm trying to eat healthy, and we don't end up in that negative mindset again. And then, of course, exercise. Exercise is a great thing for the body. Some people overdo it. When you're thinking about an exercise program for yourself, moderate exercise most of the time is what you want, with a couple of periods of high stress. So whether that's, I have a moderate program most of the week, and then 2 days a week I do something that is more strenuous, or whether that's I have a moderate program for a month and then I have a week of really intense. We just want to make sure, again, that we're giving those periods of recovery, and active recovery is great. A way that I can explain this to you is that I have been lifting weights pretty consistently since Labor Day. And normally I would also be swimming, but all the pools are currently closed, so I'm not getting to swim. But yesterday I was supposed to have an active recovery cardio workout. And so I went for a 45-minute run with my husband, where we were able to talk the entire time. What that meant for us was that instead of running a 8-minute mile pace, we were running a 10-minute mile pace, and we literally were talking almost the entire time, except on the hills, because I still can't talk and run a hill to save my life. So that active recovery cardio workout gave me a day that I was still working out, still doing something healthy for my body, but it wasn't as strenuous as the leg workout that I have to do later today. I should say get to do later today, if we're trying to be positive about that. And then supplements. Supplements are a tricky conversation to have with most people, because not all supplements are created equally. I choose to use a specific type of supplement with my clients that I'm working with because I know that that company has gone through the process of having their products independently lab tested and making sure that what is in the product, what they say is in the product, is actually in the product. And most of the supplements that I recommend to my patients also have what's called 100% athlete guarantee behind them, meaning that that athlete, if they're taking only those supplements, would never test positive for a banned substance, according to the International Olympic Committee standard. So, and if they did, and they could prove that they were only using those supplements, the company will pay them $1 million. I choose those supplements because I know what's in them and I know that they're safe for the people that I'm trying to support their health as opposed to detract from it. I also use essential oils, and one of the reasons I use that is because, like I showed you in that slide, things like magnolia, frankincense, licorice root, those things can be helpful. Well, those aren't necessarily vitamins, but you can get them out of an essential oil and have that support the system. And my own personal experience with using essential oils, I was taking supplements that should have supported help with my thyroid. It was a little bit, I was seeing little bits of change. I added the essential oils. The change was monumental, super fast. So I do recommend essential oils to my clients as well. If you're taking a supplement and you're not sure, one of the things you can do is look at the bottle and see if it has that NSF certification stamp on it, because if it has that, they've gone through at least a process of having the product lab tested. The next thing I typically tell my patients to do, and I've been telling my patients this for years, especially if it's one of those baked pills and not a vegetable capsule, you want to take that, stick it in a quarter of a cup of vinegar, and see if it dissolves within 4 hours. If it doesn't dissolve within 4 hours, it's not going to dissolve in your stomach because the vinegar is about the pH of your stomach. And it only has about 4 to 6 hours to get through the stomach before it hits the small intestine. The small intestine is where all absorption of nutrients happens. So if it's not dissolved by the time it gets there, you aren't getting out of it what you need. And if you're really not sure, one of the things I tell people to do as well is check and see who the parent company is in it. So I've also been recommending to my clients who don't want to pay for an expensive supplement, that just want a multivitamin that'll help them. If you think that that's just what you want, is a multivitamin, the best one that you can probably get on the market, and I do not get paid for saying this, is Flintstone's chewables. One of the reasons is their parent company is stamped right on the bottle. It is Bayer. Bayer is a pharmaceutical company. They have pharmaceutical standards in place, and they're selling a product that they want to be safe for your children. So if it's safe for a child, it's safe for you. And because it's a chewable, you know it dissolves before it hits the small intestine. So you have that benefit. So if all you're looking for is a multivitamin and you want to improve that, Flintstone's chewables are probably the best one that you can get on the market that's inexpensive. And I know people are going to ask the question about Centrum vitamins and that kind of stuff. They really don't test well. There's an independent study done by the Canadian Medical Review Board where they looked at, I think it was 10,000 different supplements. Centrum got a 1-star rating out of 5. And so it's not that they produce a bad mix of what's in it. It doesn't dissolve. And so it can't be absorbed. So that's a problem. So now we're going to move into autoimmune disease. So autoimmune disease, Hippocrates said that all disease starts in the gut. And if you notice, I wrote here, any process that can cause dis-ease, because if you break the word disease apart, dis-ease is what it comes out to. So anything that creates stress in the body is an autoimmune disease. They have now labeled MS, diabetes, and cancer as an autoimmune disease. And thyroid disorder, Hashimoto's thyroid disorder, is probably the most underdiagnosed autoimmune disease in the United States. Other autoimmune diseases you might have heard about are PCOS, PMS, but more specifically the PMMD, premenstrual PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And then adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, Cushing's, Addison's, Crohn's, IBS, celiac, all of those are considered autoimmune disease. And for that last line, they for sure start in the gut. So when Hippocrates made the statement about all autoimmune disease starting in the gut, he was along the right thought process, but it wasn't necessarily 100% true. What we know now happens is that when the GI balance of good bacteria and bad gut bacteria become more favorable to bad gut bacteria, we have a process of nutrients not getting absorbed, and so disease starts because the body doesn't have what it needs to do tissue repair. When that occurs, the gut bacteria that are negative actually start to proliferate or grow faster, and they actually knock out the bad gut or the good gut bacteria. So there are some studies to support that people who have a good balance in their gut bacteria and hold more of the good gut bacteria that actually help break down your food and improve nutrient absorption are thinner around the world than people who have that proliferation of bad gut bacteria. Again, if you're looking at the way that your body functions, there's also research to support that sugar, high intake of sugar, supports bad gut bacteria growth, and it supports things like yeast growth as well. And I know a lot of people hear a lot about candida. Well, your body needs a certain level of candida, but the overgrowth is when you then have a problem and you end up with things like bacterial vaginosis or thrush or those kinds of things happening where your system can't fight off that yeast anymore. And you have to go on, typically, they stick you on an antifungal or an antibiotic. The antibiotic kills all of the bacteria, not just the bad bacteria. Antifungals can do the same thing, and so they create a lot of imbalance in the GI system, and so you still have poor nutrient absorption, which means that you still don't feel better until months later. So what we typically have people do is actually take a good yeast that fights off candida instead of taking the antibiotic or the antifungal, because we know that if they take those things, we're basically starting from ground zero and they have almost no immune system anymore. So the next slide I'm going to show you, this is just an introduction about a specific case that we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth. And this is really about a whole system of things that happened to this particular woman. She was a 26-year-old female after a surgery to, it says repair her left patellar tendon. What they actually did was move it because she had chronic dislocations of her kneecap. At the time of the surgery, she weighed 205, and 12 weeks later, she was at 140 pounds. A lot of people, her primary care physician, kind of pushed this under the rug as, I've been encouraging you to lose weight for years, and so I think that this is not a bad thing, and we just need to go with it. What happened along this process, though, is that she developed facial pain, weakness, paralysis. She had an anaphylactic reaction in the rye room at Stranahan's. And then she developed an allergy to her own sweat, where every time she tried to exercise, she broke out in hives. And then she had non-forced, so she's not bulimic, but she had non-forced vomiting every time she ate, which I consider to be a significant problem because obviously that creates a nutrition deficiency. So how do I heal and have less stress? A sleep schedule is the number one way. And what do I mean by a sleep schedule? So a sleep schedule can be a variety of different things, but typically what we want is for you to go to bed around the same time and get up at the same time every day, regardless of, so say like you go out with friends, you're up until 2 a.m., your normal wake up time is 6 a.m. the next morning I want you to get up at 6. The reason I want you to get up at 6 is because we're trying to set your clock. That doesn't mean you can't take a nap at some point during the day, but we want it to be at least a 30-minute nap, no longer than 2 hours. And again, that's important because we need you to go through a REM cycle if you're going to sleep for a long period of time, but we also want you to go to bed at your normal time that night. So keep those things in mind. And then other things that you can look at, which I'm sure you've heard this before, is avoid caffeine after 12 p.m. Any kind of caffeine, even if that's from chocolate, which is my biggest downfall probably. I love to have 1 ounce of dark chocolate, 80% dark chocolate, which is bad because that has more caffeine in it than milk chocolate. And I like to have it after dinner, but I'm trying to adjust that so that I have it after lunch and sometimes even closer to 10 a.m. because some days I don't eat lunch until 3 o'clock. So no caffeine after noon. You want to avoid electronics before bed for at least half an hour, but ideally for 60 minutes. And the reason is the light stimulates your brain to think that it's daytime, and so melatonin doesn't get produced and cortisol can increase again. So that includes things like your Kindle. Your Kindle is an electronic device, your phone, obviously television, computer, and even if you can dim the lights in your house, that is a great way to help get you on a better sleep schedule. Also, not eating a couple hours before bed can help because, again, it takes 4 to 6 hours for things to get through the stomach. And if your stomach is full, your body has a lot of trouble shutting down. Now, I don't always make the 4-hour mark before I go to bed. I don't expect you to do that, but 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed is a great marker for being able to shut down that eating process. Nutrition. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but this is a great way to have less oxidative stress in the body. So the standard American diet, the acronym for that spells out SAD. That's kind of sad, huh? Our diets are so loaded with sugar and caffeine and processed foods, and the amount of whole food that we eat in this country is less than other countries by half in some cases. And we sit more than other countries as well. So the goal would be that you should have 5 to 9 servings, or a half a cup of, is a serving, by the way, of vegetables a day. Or if you take the size of your fist, you should have 2.5 to 4 of your fist size vegetables a day. And then 3 to 5 servings of fruit each day. And again, a serving of fruit is half a cup. So if you're going to Costco and you're getting the apple that's this big, that apple is like 2.5 servings of fruit. So if you're considering that, you might think about breaking it up, like break that into 2 or 3 pieces. That way you can eat that sugar throughout the day as opposed to all at one meal, so that we get an appropriate insulin response as well. And then you want to make sure that you have protein at each meal, somewhere between 30 and 40 grams of protein. And that should come from lean sources. So you don't want it all to come from red meat, but you do want some variety: fish, chicken, other sources like legumes. You can use that as well. If you're on a vegan diet, I'm sorry, I don't know all of those, but there are some great resources for you online that you can find, and even some vegan nutritionists here in town that we could direct you to. So we can help you get that protein level to where you're getting enough to help support tissue repair. And then when I say nutrition, again, we're talking about 80% of the time you want to be doing what you can to support the body. So that means you can have a cheat meal. It means that you can have a cheat day, but you have to know yourself and know your limits. And if you're someone who needs to have a routine and eat almost the same every day to be able to eat that way, don't have a whole cheat day. Do a cheat meal or your cheat snack each day, and make sure that you portion it out. So if you're someone who's like, oh, I just love Oreos and every once in a while I crave them and I go buy the big double stuffed bag of them and eat the whole thing in one sitting, maybe what you can do instead is try not to have that stuff in the house, first of all. And then when you do crave it, if you're going to buy the big bag because it's more cost affordable, okay, fine. But put them in little baggies so that you have 2 cookies in each bag and stick them in the freezer. And that way you have to make an effort to actually eat them. It's not like it's just sitting there in your cupboard where it has easy access. That is something that can help you. And then if you feel like I'm hungry, one of the biggest things we know is that most of us are dehydrated. A lot of people that I talk to on a daily basis average about 32 ounces of water, and most people need about 80 ounces of water a day. So try drinking 8 to 16 ounces of water first and see how you feel after that. If you think, oh no, I'm full and I'm satisfied, great. If you're still hungry, have a portion of whatever it is. Don't eat from the bag of chips. Those kinds of things are just little tricks that can help you. And then meditation. So I want to take you through this little, oh, sorry, I skipped supplements. So if you feel like you have a hormone imbalance, one of the biggest things that I want you to keep in mind is that there are supplements that can help hormone imbalance, whether it's for the thyroid, for cortisol, for testosterone, for estrogen. And probably one of the #1 supplements that I recommend to most of my clients is a supplement called DIM. Basically, what they've done in this supplement is they've concentrated all the good things you get out of broccoli to help detoxify the liver and support glutathione production. Most of the clients that I have taking it, a big indication for taking it is if they've had like adult acne breakouts. The DIM supplement actually helps those breakouts decrease. And so we know that we're getting a better hormone balance, and it usually does that by about week 2. So that's one of the #1 things that I recommend. Most of my clients also require a vitamin D supplement because they don't produce enough of it, even if they spend time in the sun. Heck, I don't produce enough of it, and I'm of Mediterranean descent, so I have to take a vitamin D supplement. But that is something you can and should get tested. And then the other supplements that I typically recommend are prebiotics and probiotics. And again, that's just to help support good gut bacteria. And then the supplements that I think for sure everyone should be using if they hate vegetables is a green drink and or an antioxidant drink. So the 3 that I typically recommend are a prebiotic or probiotic, a DIM supplement, and then the green drink for people who don't get vegetables. And if they test low for it, vitamin D is the 4th one that typically gets thrown in there. So meditation. A lot of people think this takes a lot of time, but I just want to go through this one really quick. So if you're so inclined, if you don't want to close your eyes, you don't have to, but if you would like to just for a moment, close your eyes. And I want you to think about something that brings you joy, like something that every time you think about it just makes you smile. And as you think about that, I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose for at least 3 seconds. Hold here at the top for 1 second, and then breathe out for 8. And let's take a breath in again. Hold here at the top, and breathe out. We're going to do 2 more of those. And last one. And notice how you feel right now after doing that. And that was just through some deep breathing and thinking about something that brings you joy. You can feel your heart rate come down. You can feel your breathing relax. You can feel almost a smile come to your face when you do that. And this is something, just that easy step is something that I do with a lot of people who have even panic attacks. Just learning how to breathe can help bring that down, that fight or flight system out of the equation. You'll notice the next thing I have on there is talk to someone that's not your partner and not family. The reason I have that is because your family and your closest girlfriend or closest guy friend, or your spouse, your partner, whoever it happens to be, they're gonna have an opinion and they're gonna try and solve your problem for you. And most of the time, when we're trying to get something out, we're trying to hear ourselves process through it and get rid of it or find the solution on our own. And we don't want someone who has an opinion about how we should be treated or how we should feel to input into that. So having a neutral party is a great way to get rid of some stress that you can talk to. And I know me personally, I've seen a counselor off and on throughout my life for different things. It started when I was in high school, and I have continued to see one and saw one in earnest for about 6 months a couple years ago because I had to have a hernia repair, and I kept having this dream about I was going to die and my kids weren't going to have a mom and all those things that kind of overwhelmed my system. And part of it was related to stress at work, and part of it was that my husband thought I was going crazy and that I was stupid to think I was going to die, and I was a healthy individual and there was no way that was going to happen. And so I just started seeing a counselor once a week again. And it's nice to have someone who is just there to hear you process through and help you process through without having an opinion. And I'm not saying my husband's a great guy. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today, being able to own my own business and be a mom. I wouldn't be able to do that without his support. So I love him to death, but he has an opinion about how I should feel about myself. And it's not always what I need. What I need is someone to just hear me and help me process. And I think that's true for most of us. So the last thing I have on here, step 6, is journal 3 positive things that happen to you each day and don't write down the negative or qualify it. And what do I mean by that? So when you qualify things, your body hears the negative as well. Your brain, your cells, they hear that negative part as well. And so we want you to start not qualifying the good things. So a lot of people have had a lot of stress during this pandemic outbreak. And what I've noticed is that you can get caught up in it or you can be positive about it. So the things for me that have been true during this pandemic are that I have had an amazing opportunity to work on the things on my business as opposed to in my business that I don't normally get a chance to do. And that has been so helpful to me to redefine my direction and how I want to support my clients. I've had a great opportunity to reconnect with my kids more hours a day than typical. And I've had an amazing opportunity to sleep in, which I almost never do. I'm up at 4 most mornings, and I think during this time, I've been averaging getting up at 5 a.m. I'll have to adjust my sleep schedule when we come back into a normal schedule, but did you see how I just qualified that? My body heard that. So don't qualify it. Think about the positive things. Write them down and reread themselves to yourself. Those things, to yourself. When you're starting to feel that stress come on, what are the 3 positive things that happened each day? Don't write down the negative and don't qualify it. And read those back to yourselves the next morning and start your day out in a positive. So why should I have a coach or a functional medicine practitioner, or a functional wellness coach, or a counselor, or whatever it is? Accountability is the number one thing. All of us need someone to hold accountable to. I have a business coach, and he holds me accountable. I have assignments that are due every week with him, and he holds me accountable to those things. And if I don't get them done, there aren't necessarily consequences, but I feel a little guilty about it. So that accountability piece, and what I say to people, and this sounds a little bit harsh, but it's very true. If you could do this on your own and restore your health on your own, you'd already be doing it. If you could lose the weight on your own, you'd already be doing it. If you look at the most successful people in programs like Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, Noom, CrossFit, they all attend group sessions and have the group help lift them up. They have a coach that helps lift them up. And we all need that. We all need someone to help hold us accountable. We all need that workout partner that we have to meet at the gym or at the trailhead. We need that person to help keep us accountable. And then you need someone to guide, where do I go next? And so I'm going to talk again about Lauren, that 26-year-old female. So what happened to her, basically her story is that she came into my clinic as a PT patient, and she ended up becoming a functional medicine patient because of what happened. So she was 4 weeks after having that surgery when she came into my clinic for the first time, and we just gave her some gentle range of motion exercises. 2 weeks later, I saw her again, and we started consistent PT for range of motion and strength of that leg. And when she came in, her leg was kind of bluish in color, the one that she had surgery on, and it was cool to the touch. And I have one of those old-fashioned, I don't know if you guys have ever seen these, but they put the temperature thing on your forehead and it tells you the temperature. Well, I have one of those in my clinic, and so we tested the temperature of the skin versus the opposite leg, and it was 2 to 3 degrees cooler on average. So we start going through what's been happening in her history, and she's had 4 or 5 visits to the ER. They've given her an injection to control a headache. They've given her a prescription for pain meds that she's never filled because she had pain medication from the surgery, and she stopped taking that at the end of the first week because it didn't help, and she felt like it actually made things worse for her. She was taking Tylenol to control her pain from the knee surgery, but nothing else. And she started talking about her, what is your normal constitution? Well, your constitution is what happens, things that happen every day. So she was waking up between 1 and 3 a.m. with the worst headache she had ever had in her life. And nothing helped it. She would put ice on her neck, she would put ice on her head, she would put heat. Nothing changed it. Pain medication didn't change it. These injections at the ER didn't change it. In the process of that 6 weeks, the ER had labeled her as drug seeking and flagged her. And all of these other things were underlying that people were missing, including the orthopedic surgeon. She had a follow-up at his office and saw the physician assistant, and they were like, I don't know why it's like that. It's just maybe your body is just having a hard time recovering from anesthesia. So she came in for her, I think it was her 3rd PT visit, and she had bruising up and down the other leg, and the other leg was slightly yellow. And I said, when are your headaches? And she said, between 1 and 3 a.m. And I said, you're taking Tylenol? And she said, yes, but only on days when I come to PT. And I said, I need to talk to your surgeon, and I need to talk to him now. And she said, why? And we had had a conversation, I should back up, we had had a conversation the previous visit that she was highly allergic to nickel. So she had her surgeon cell phone number in her phone, and I called them and said, hey, this is Dr. Marcy over at Agility. I have Lauren here with me, and this is what's going on. And I am sure that she is in labor failure, and she is having a severe autoimmune reaction to the pin that was placed in her leg. And he said, we used a surgical steel. It has less than 5% nickel, and no one reacts to it. And I said, no, this is what's happening. This girl is having significant issues. If we don't take care of this, we're going to have a serious problem on our hands. And he said, all right, how do we do the ER? So they did some tests when she got to the ER. She was allergic to the pin. She was allergic to the surgical cement that they used to place the pin. She was allergic to the stitches. She was allergic to the glue that they used on the outside of her skin. So they went in and removed the pin from her knee and replaced it with a titanium pin and made a larger hole because they didn't want to use the bone cement because she was allergic to it. And they said when they removed the pin, the bone was green around the pin. They actually had to irrigate it and scrape it out because it was green, like rotting meat gets green when it's very old. And it was kind of scary. So then she came out of that surgery and she was vomiting when she came out of the surgery as they pulled the intubation tube out of her. And that's when she started losing weight. And again, her primary care physician said, well, I've been asking you to lose weight for years. I think this is not a bad thing, et cetera, et cetera. She had this condition where she went up to bail and she ended up with the facial paralysis and numbness and weakness. And when she described what was happening when she would eat, I was like, you know, that sounds a lot like this condition called eosinophilic esophagitis. And like, for some reason, the sphincter at where your esophagus meets the stomach is not doing what it's supposed to. So we had her meet a GI doctor and he tested her, and sure enough, that was what was happening. For some reason, when they intubated her and de-intubated her, they hit this cord that helps close off that area, and they actually tore it. So her body was rejecting food because it couldn't keep it in, but it also, she had developed weakness in the esophagus because of how much swelling was there, that swallowing became difficult, and that was what was causing the vomiting. And the swelling was caused because eosinophilic means that white blood cells were building up in the esophagus and creating that swelling. And it wasn't getting better. So her GI doc and her surgeon actually told her that if I had not been her PC, she probably would have died and nobody would have known what happened until they did an autopsy. And that's a really sad statement. And it took us another 6 months to get the drug-seeking label off of her chart. I don't want that to happen to anybody. That's a mess of a healthcare decision. And people missed the signs and the symptoms. So looking at all the organ systems together, we were able to help save this woman, and she's now a physician assistant. So those are things to kind of keep in mind of like, how do we get to where we're going next, and how do I even know what to ask? Sometimes you need someone who knows the system or knows the body processes better than you do to get to that next step. The other thing a coach can do, or a functional medicine provider can do, when we're trying to do better for ourselves, a lot of our family and friends, they feel guilty about what they're doing, and so they want to detract from your success. And we can give you those conversation tools that you can have with your family and friends to explain why this is so important to you and where you want to go and how you would appreciate their support without sounding like you know everything, or you're going to put them off, or you don't want them as friends anymore, because you get to pick your friends, but you don't necessarily get to pick your family. And so having someone there who can help you navigate those conversations can be extremely helpful. So that is what I have for you today on functional medicine. And if there are some questions, I'd love to be able to answer those for you guys.
Yeah, so there's a couple. First, we're just kind of technical things, so I think we're good with those. But one is just saying a lot of what you're talking about sounds like using natural supplements in the body's ability to heal itself. Does functional medicine have connections to Eastern philosophies, so acupuncture, yoga, that type of things? If so, how do you incorporate these with your clients? And he also listed, I can't pronounce it, but Ayurveda. Maybe I said,
Ayurveda.
yeah.
So yeah, there are a lot of people who would say that the connection between functional medicine and Eastern medicine are very close. In terms of looking at the bigger picture, I'm probably one of the few physical therapists you will find that will refer to a chiropractor on occasion. And I would say that probably about 20% of my clients are seeing an acupuncturist. And the reason is, I think in general, supporting the body is about having a team who helps you support it when you don't know how to do it yourself. And reaching out to those other disciplines is often helpful.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And then just another one here. You said iPads are bad before bed. I've become accustomed to watching TV to fall asleep with a sleep timer. Would it be better to read even though I will end up sleeping with the light on all night?
Yeah, so if you could read a traditional book as opposed to something on the iPad, there has been some studies that show that if you're watching television as you fall asleep, the brain activity remains higher throughout sleep, so you're less likely to go into a full cycle of REM sleep and have that good deep recovery sleep. So even if it's sleeping with a light on, if you can change that light bulb so it's something like a 25 or 40 watt bulb, something that you can still see the words on the page, but you're not getting too much light stimulus, would be better.
Cool. So those were the two specifically for you. I think that's all, unless anyone had any last minute questions. And Lauren, you can chime in too if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I had a couple questions for you, Marcy. I'll turn my camera back on here so we can actually talk. And if anyone still continues to have any questions, just let us know. You can still kind of either reach out to Marcy directly. So first and foremost would be if people want to get a hold of you, because functional medicine is not covered by insurance, it's cash pay. I know we have some people attending out of state on the lecture here today. So tell everybody kind of how they can get a hold of you if they're interested, and then maybe to kind of extrapolate on, so one kind of curiosity for me, we have a history of thyroid problems in my family, and so my grandmother, my mother, I've never been tested. My sisters, to my knowledge, has never been tested. And so like if someone's thinking about starting a functional medicine sort of regime with you, like what does that look like? Do you test cortisol levels? Do you, like kind of how does that step through? You kind of go through a family history, like take me through the process of like a plan of care and what that might look like, and then kind of how people can reach out to you to establish a plan of care.
Yeah, okay, so the first thing I typically do with all of my clients is we do a lot of paperwork. To fill out all of the paperwork, looking at all the family history and that kind of thing, it probably actually takes about 3 hours. And so I send people a link to this system that does that for me. It's called the Living Matrix, and so they get an email that says, your provider has created a portal for you on this thing, and they want you to fill out these forms. Once you've filled out those forms, I then send you another set of forms that go more in detail on some of those items. And then I review that stuff at every stage. So I make sure that I have, before the person's appointment, I have to have at least 5 days so that they can fill out that paperwork and I can review it, get them sent the second set of paperwork, and I can review that before their appointment because I want to kind of have an idea of what's going on with them before they come in. And so then when they come in, if they've had any blood labs done, I ask them to bring those with them. If they haven't had any done, it's not a big deal. But even if they've had something done 2 years ago, I want to see that because we want to start tracking what's happening over a time period, not just snapshots in time. And then typically, if I notice that there's something going on with hormones, particularly, I will have them take what's called the Dutch test because the Dutch test gives us an indication of cortisol, estrogen, testosterone, and vitamin D. And so it covers a lot. And the Dutch test is that one that I actually pulled that slide from. And it's fairly easy to do. It doesn't require a blood draw, and it gives us so much information happening in the hormone pathway that we can see where things are breaking down and start supporting that immediately. Because we usually get, so they do that test, they have to do it for 3 days. They send in the kit to the lab, and then the lab sends me the report, usually within, from the time they send in the kit to the time I get the results is 8 days. And so then I get back with them, we review that, we go through that and decide what our plan is from there. And a lot of times we'll get a lot out of that history. So the history piece is really important. And I know I have a couple of clients who are adopted and they just don't know their family medical history until like age 4. And so we start from age 4 and go, you know, where did you live? What was the soil like? What was the drinking water like? What was your food intake? Those kinds of things, and look at what could be happening and then what were other stressors. So we start with that and move through that. If they have not, so here is one thing I will say. If they have a primary care provider, I give them a list of stuff that their insurance should cover testing on if they want blood work done right away. Oddly enough, for some reason, even though there's tons of research supporting the use of vitamin D for most populations that live above a certain level of the equator, insurance in this country still doesn't cover a vitamin D test. But there are labs we can send people to that will test vitamin D, and they do it for like $45, as opposed to when I run it through my insurance, it's $278 for me to get it done. When I pay this lab, it's $45. So I have things like that where I can get it cheaper. And we start looking at all of those things. So we can also do, if there's something that seems like it's significant, we do genetic testing, and those are what we call a blood spot and a cheek swab. So they literally prick their finger, we put it on this sheet of paper, and we can get all kinds of things back from that genetic testing, including whether or not a certain drug is appropriate for them, or what diet. Actually, we can totally develop a diet for somebody based on genetics and help them eat to actually support their DNA. And then we kind of guide them through that process. A total, typically my average client from start to finish of like an intense program with me is 18 months. I do some short 6-week things on here are some adjustments that you can make that we know will globally help you, that are less expensive than the 18-month program, obviously, but the 6-week program is really just kind of to scratch the surface of, I'm feeling bad, I want to start feeling better, I don't know how to get there. So we start with that 6-week program and move them through. And if they decide to join either the 3-month program, the 9-month program, or the 18-month program, then we talk about those steps along the way. And if anyone wanted to get a hold of me and talk to me more about it, the best way is my website, www.agilityphysio.com. The contact us page, all of that comes directly to me. They can also email me directly at drmarcy@agilityphysio.com, or my phone number 303-773-0771. And that is, it comes directly to my cell phone, so they can text me.
That's fabulous. Yeah, this is great. Like, I don't know if you're interested, but I'm definitely like ready to get staff involved and like, okay, you guys got to listen to this conversation, because it is, you know, I think in medicine, I mean, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but, you know, having that resource of providers that you can just pick up a phone call, and it hasn't really been until I would say later in my career that I've been, you know, you have those referral sources that you've developed relationships with. So it's really easy to call a cell phone or, you know, like, hey, this doesn't make sense. And I've established myself enough within my profession to know, like, okay, they kind of know what they're talking about, you know, over there. So I'm going to actually talk to them for a few minutes and hear them out, as opposed to just leaving a message with somebody. And so you really do need a team of practitioners, and everything that you're hitting on today is just like, oh my gosh, this is like totally the missing link of, you know, as within the world of physical therapy, we know so I mean, and it always kind of, I don't know when this study came out, you might know, but like it was, I think it came out of the Optum data, but like a telltale of like whether a chronic or an acute injury is going to turn into a chronic injury. The number 2 like predictor is history of abuse before adolescence. And you're like, the first time I heard that stat, you're like, what? That makes no sense. And then you start thinking about it a little bit more from kind of the health professional standpoint. You're like, it makes perfect sense. And so I don't know if you want to kind of speak to like those pieces, but I just, it's like, it's just that missing link of like, oh yeah, duh. Like we need to be looking at all these things as health professionals, and just by the nature of the specialization within our health profession, while we have probably more depth of knowledge than we ever have in the history of Western medicine, it very much lacks that breadth and, having a team of providers and something, so I'm super psyched. This was great. You were above and beyond like any expectations for today. I'm like, okay, I got to get you, I can think of like 3 patients right now that I'm sending over to you. So, so if you want to speak to that a little bit, but regardless, this was all great stuff. So
yeah, so the Optum study that talked about chronic pain, acute pain becoming chronic, and trauma particularly before adolescence, particularly related to abuse, and that it's a really interesting study, the way that they looked at it and the way that they determined what abuse or trauma was, because it could even have been like a verbal trauma. And they know that kids who grow up in a household where there is more yelling, where there is more fighting, even if it's not directed specifically at the child, they go on to have more anxiety, they go on to experience more episodes of addictive behavior, and all of that data combined, when you look at it, and if you can go back and address that trauma, even if we can't change the fact that it happened, if we can actually address it while we're looking at the person's entire health picture, then those people tend to get out of those episodes faster, and that pain comes down. And a lot of honestly, what leads to autoimmune dysfunction has to do with toxicity, and that toxicity happens anytime there's input coming in that is negative. So it can be verbal, it can be something that you think about yourself, it can be something that you feel about another person even, and it can be something that someone thinks about you. And it's really interesting to see that connection of how if you say something like, oh my God, my kids are crazy, their behavior amplifies in that direction, as opposed to if you're like, they probably need something and I'm not getting them that support. So let's figure out what it is. Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Do they need to be held? And if you can calm that down in a positive way and have those positive inputs, then their behavior changes. And it's really fascinating to watch and fascinating to see what happens in all of those situations. And yeah, if we can change that health paradigm and we have multiple people that we can call in to help us support with counselors, emotional healers, hypnotherapists, acupuncture, chiropractic, physical therapy, massage therapists. I mean, I have a whole list of people that I refer to because I know a lot of stuff. I also know that not every person is the right patient for me, and not every person is the right client for me, and I'm not going to be able to save every person that comes in my path. They've been put there because I might need to direct them somewhere else, and I need to recognize where that is and help them the best way that I can.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, I wish we were all like in person so we could all give you a round of applause, but so this was great. Thank you so much for coming on. Everyone who's attending, please repost this. Part of why we're doing these webinars is to, obviously for us as Functional Performance Center, get in front of our patients and our clients. and have an excuse to kind of reach out to everybody as another touch point. But also just to support professionals and small businesses that I have come in contact over the years and people that I believe in. So just kind of a bit of a call to action for everybody. Please repost this lecture. Y'all will be getting a recording of it. Just get it out there, Facebook, whatever. If there's people that you think would benefit from Dr. Marcy's help, please get them in contact with her, because she's a rock star. She really is. She's one of the most intelligent therapists I've ever worked with. And I don't know if I've ever told you that, but like from day one, I was just impressed. Part of it probably was because we were both females and we were working with a bunch of guys. I think we kind of, I don't know if you ever felt it, but I was like, oh, wait a second, like, I don't know where my place is here. Yeah, so I always appreciated that piece. But seriously, guys, she's awesome, and just has even more impressed me with this lecture today. This is great stuff, and I will definitely be sending you some patients for sure. So everybody, thank you for joining, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything or have any further questions following up. So next Saturday, we are not going to be doing a webinar. I know a lot of you guys have been tuning in each Saturday. So we are going to have a bit of a hiatus for next Saturday, and then after that we'll have some orthopedist on. Dr. Donner finally committed to a date for regenerative medicine, so he's going to be on as well. So everybody take care, be safe, happy Saturday, and Dr. Marcy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.